Hi, welcome to Sutures and Cents. Mark is laughing for those looking at YouTube because he knows I do not like doing intros.
You're so formal.
I am. So, on the second part of Preston's interview, which is today's episode of Sutures and Cents, Preston and Mark dive into health insurance companies from a very high level point of view. They're not going into the details of everything, but they look at it from a high level point of view, and they do a pretty objective job at describing why they are the way that they are, right? Preston does what I thought is the best way of actually describing, like, hey, this is why your denials are happening. This is why
Right.
they are doing it. And Mark listens. Um,
Always a good thing.
Always a good thing. He's a good listener. So, we're going to dive into that, and then we'll give a short recap on the back end. But here is the second episode of Preston Alexander on Sutures and Cents.
So you have taken, let's call it this. Let's call it a special interest in the insurance companies, the health insurance companies. And I like to joke, I'm a Tony Kornheiser from Pardon the Interruption fan. And he had an issue where he couldn't get an MRI I'm a spine guy, for what was clearly MRI indicated in sciatica. The only way you can look at it is with an MRI. And they denied it like 3, 4, 9 times, and he was calling, and when they, I don't think they're really worried about him, but he's got a pretty big audience, and he was calling them carelessly indifferent, gives no aid, and it was like, it's funny for Cigna. You've taken an interest in these insurance companies, and where'd that come from?
I mean, I think it came from the same place of the interest in health systems. And, for a while, and I used to say, and I backtrack it now, that like health insurance wasn't like that interesting to write about because like the motivation is so clear. Like nonprofit health systems, in a way, you're shocked when you look at the numbers, when you hear about it, when you hear about like, Atrium's $600 million offshore investment in the Cayman Islands back in like 2019, by the way. Because you're like, what? Right? But like when you hear about United Healthcare, the number 5 largest company publicly traded, like a publicly traded company legally is obligated to maximize shareholder value to the extent that if they stop, shareholders could sue the board and the executive of the company for not maximizing shareholder value. So I'm like, what's there to discuss? We know what the game is there. I take that back totally. It is really interesting, and it's in interesting from a financial perspective and how they do it, and interesting in the worst way for how it actually affects and impacts people. And also, interestingly, as much as I maybe pick bones with health systems from time to time, I'm sure a lot of people are like, I don't know what I'm talking about. That I look often, one of the areas that I look at is the payer mix for health systems, and you can tell a lot about a health system just by looking at its payer mix. And what that indicates, is a health system doing well? Well, let's look at their mix. And are they 80% commercial, which is ludicrously high, but I've seen it before. And are they doing bad with 80% commercial? Well, then why are they, and it gives you a lot of information and how the payers operate. And then there's a guy that everyone should follow. His name is Wendell Potter. He's phenomenal. He's an ex-Cigna executive, and he writes a newsletter that I recommend on my Substack, and everybody should read it. And he talks about insurance companies a lot and almost exclusively, and just what they do to your point about like denials and automatic prior authorization denials. And the game is maximizing profitability. They're bound to a medical loss ratio. They usually come in around 83%. They're only allowed to make, they're required to spend at least 85%, right, on patient care, on like the medical care that they provide. But the trick is in, and I was having a discussion with someone earlier about timing. The trick is in the timing. Because if you pay me all these premiums, I know I'm going to owe money. And I put that on my balance sheet and my liabilities. Say you paid me $10,000, which you paid me way more in premiums last year, I'm sure. But I'll put it as a liability. The amount that I think I'll have to pay out, which is about 85%. So I'll put $8,500 on as a liability. But you paid me that money. That's a liability of cash that I have, that I know that I have. So the same way that health systems have become these financial institutions, like, what do you think that the health insurance company is going to do with that money? Well, I'm going to go invest it somewhere that I can make disproportionate returns on the free money you just gave me. So if you come knocking and you're like, dang, dude, I've been eating McDonald's for the last 55 years exclusively, and I need a triple bypass, I'm going to be like, shoot, that money is locked up in these investments. Plus, the returns are really great right now. You know what? Denied. Because I know that the longer I can hold that money, the more money I can make off of that money.
Right.
So it becomes this really perversely incentivized game where the denial becomes the business model because it's free money to just go make money on. And Warren Buffett famously, like, sort of let the cat out of the bag to like the masses of people, and it's called float. And it's like, you prepay for all this stuff on services that I don't know when I have to, if I have to, just sometime later need to pay out. I'm going to take that float. And that's what made Warren Buffett so wealthy is he took Geico or whatever he owns. He took the float and he bought billions of dollars of companies, and Coke and other, American classic companies. And that's why he's a mega billionaire, is because free money invested to be paid out later. And that's what health insurance companies do and have become.
Yeah. And I think, like you were describing, that we've talked about sort of how they become these financial institutions. The difference, and you talk about this, but the fundamental difference between that financial institution and, let's say, Apple is, or anybody, is they also, like, their job is to deliver healthcare, and there's a level of responsibility associated with that is different than many other industries, and so, like, that's to me fundamentally I'm paying out the nose for insurance premiums, hoping I don't need them, but when I do need them, as this part of this agreement we have signed, and you're still going to make it hard for me to get the product I've already paid you for. It's so fundamentally American sometimes is what it feels like. It's and when you have employers paying a large part of it, you're insulated. You're so insulated from it, and everybody is. You just don't realize it, and I think people are starting to sense it a little bit more now because their deductibles have gone up so high, as well as their premiums. Is that your sense of it, that people are starting to question this more and more? Because
I think
they seem to be getting bigger and bigger.
I know. I think that people are questioning it more, but it's still so hard to then the question is like, well, what do you do about it? And it's really easy to be like where you sit and where I sit, and to be like, people are starting to realize it, right? But we live in the healthcare bubble, and like most people, Main Street America, like, they don't know, nor do they know or have the ability, oftentimes because of access or coverage or job security or whatever, the ability to do anything about it. I mean, things are changing, but they're changing at the edges. And so how long it takes to sort of like, change all the way is to be seen. And I mean, to unseat a company that does, what does United do? How many hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue annually, $385 billion or whatever? Like, how do you change that? And again, sort of to your earlier question of like, why do I do this? Like, well, who loses in all this? Your point is well made. you paid premiums in case you needed coverage for healthcare, and like they're going to do everything they can to basically like not deliver on the money you already paid. But in addition to that, they, United and Cigna and whatever, they are the administrators of Medicare and Medicaid and Medicare Advantage. And like Molina, which a lot of people haven't even heard of, is a publicly traded, and Centene Corporation, they're both publicly traded Medicaid insurers. So they provide Medicaid plans. I mean, we're talking about tax dollars, state tax and federal tax dollars. United, for example, hasn't grown its core insurance business in like a decade, but they have Optum and all of its whatever, and they have Medicare and Medicare Advantage. And if you look at the growth of their core insurance versus Medicare, it's like flat and like 20% year over year. So these companies, they pay dividends, they pay outrageous bonuses to their executive teams, which I don't comment on a lot, but it's still there.
Right.
They buy back stocks. Like, and how do they do that? Well, they do it with like our premium dollars, our tax dollars, very directly and literally. You can see it like all over their income statements. And they do it with our employers' money, which, so instead of, when you look at their books, their two biggest line items are like salary and healthcare benefits. Yeah. And when healthcare benefits are running away and are crazy expensive, you think you're getting a raise next year? Can't afford it. You think you're going to buy higher quality, raw material? No, we're going to go look for lower cost because like we can't afford it. So healthcare, I'll give another nod to Warren Buffett, as he says, is like the great tapeworm of the American economy. It's just eating everything, so insidiously from the inside, and it's stagnating wage growth. It's affecting families' disposable income to pump back into the economy to raise the economic viability of the country, and it's pretty detrimental. And I mean, health systems aside, or listen, device companies, pharmaceutical, like whatever, all of them. I mean, insurance companies are a massive, perhaps the biggest, perpetrator or engine for the tapeworm. You got, what do we spend $4.3 trillion a year. Well, like United, Cigna, Blue Cross, like the top 5 insurers, well, they made about $800 billion last year in revenue. So we're talking a fifth of the $4.3 trillion, which is a fifth of the total economy, is 5 companies.
Yeah, it's staggering, and nobody really, I shouldn't say nobody, not a lot of people talk about it. It's not the coolest of conversations to have, but that's the thing. It affects. Well, look, we have commissioned salespeople. If they buy their own insurance, we pay them more. We pay them higher commissions, right? Because we don't have to handle that part of it. I'm the same way. And my wife and I did MediShare years ago. Because I remember people saying to me, "You don't have insurance with your employer. How are you going to do it? How are you going to make it?" I'm like, "What?" There's all kinds of options out there. You just, if you think you're not paying for it, you are. You just don't have as high a salary or whatever it is. But that's not how, because you don't see it.
Right.
You don't see it. And I think that's why I like when people like you write these things, because I will pat you on the back. I think you're one of the best writers I've ever read, because you do the difficult. You knock it down to bullet points, and you make the complex simple, and the confusing easy to understand. And and you do it you make me laugh too, which is hard to do.
Still there?
Right in the middle of me complimenting you.
I know. I was gonna say thank you. It went black, but I see you now, standing over me.
I know my camera disconnected for a second. I don't know what happened there. Let me see if I can. I should start yelling, Ryan, representative, because Ryan usually comes and saves me at this point. Interesting. All right, we're going to adapt, we're going to improvise, and we're going to overcome here.
We got it.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is, so bear with me for a second. We'll edit all this fun stuff out.
All good. All good.
Yeah, so, okay. So, anyway, I was complimenting you. I think you're the best writer on LinkedIn I read. And I mean that, I'm not here for kissing people's rear ends. I love reading your stuff. Your Sunday read makes me laugh out loud, and I learned something. And that's hard to do. And, again, brevity is the soul of wit, and you have managed to do both. You're one of the wittiest people if that's the case, you're one of the wittiest people I know. Thanks. Before we wrap it up, is there, you and I both do something, I think, similarly, you do it better than I do, I think. We point out the facts and the problem. We don't complain about it. We just sort of point it out. And then people will say, okay, smart guy, what do you suggest we do? I've seen you talk a little bit about this. Is there something you suggest people do who, at the end of the day, after reading your stuff, they go, you know what? I need to look into this, or what do you suggest? Is there anything you tell people to do?
Yeah, so there's two things that I think about probably the most in terms of like what can people do? Like what can we do for this? And the first I'll say is a battle cry that I often sort of shout out is to all the clinical current would-be or future entrepreneurs of the world. And that's an area that we didn't really touch on, but like has really informed a lot of what I right now write about and the way that I craft the newsletter and how I think about it is, in my view, the business of healthcare has really destroyed the practice of medicine and will continue to. And so the right way to take back the business of healthcare is for that balance to be returned on the clinical side. But you need more clinicians who understand what patients need, where patients are, how to deliver care on the business side. And I'm not saying that, every surgeon should hang it up and every nurse should like call it a day and go start a company. But, understanding business, starting businesses, being an intrapreneur, I think those are a lot of the groundswell ways that people can really start to make more positive change in healthcare, because you read about you can read about true disruption and things like this. I mean, they don't come internally, they come from the outside. If you want to make Blockbuster go bankrupt, you don't like go work at Blockbuster, you start Netflix. And maybe that's a dumb example, but it's the one I'm using today. So, what clinician entrepreneurs can go and create the next thing that's going to like really disrupt healthcare? So I think that's one thing. So, that's a big one. And I think the other thing is sort of talking more to that insurance side of the world is that, so employers, if you break it down, major payer sources. So insurers, first of all, I stole this from a good friend of mine. His name is Carl Schuessler. His last name's impossible to spell, but everyone should look up Mitigate Partners. He's in Atlanta and he's a dog fan. So he's, forever in my heart as a true Southern gentleman. And there's a lot of other folks out there who do something similar to what he does, and he creates something called the Fair Cost Health Plan. And so anyways, he taught me this. He said, insurers are not payers. We need to stop calling them payers. They're processors. They process claims. We pay everything. We pay taxes. We just went over it. We pay taxes, premiums, deductibles, out of pocket, taxes, if I said taxes, whatever, wage stagnation, like we pay for healthcare. United doesn't pay for anything, right? And so
yeah.
If you look at like true payer breakdown, government represents, $2 and change trillion, whatever. And employers represent about 1 trillion, 1.5 trillion in spend. Employers are spending the lion's share as an individual payer of healthcare costs. And so how do you make the biggest dent? Employers have, but it's hard because it's so fragmented. Like, we're talking about Home Depot and we're talking about the dry cleaner down the street. We're talking about Amazon and we're talking about like Tito's Lawn Service. You know what I mean? So it's challenging to like lump all employers in, but guys like Carl, and folks all over the country are starting to say we need to get rid of these processors. We can do things like direct primary care, which I recommend everybody check out. It's an amazing care model. It's not accessible to everybody, obviously, because it's cash pay. They don't bill insurance at all. But employers especially have a really good opportunity because they'll save on costs. If they, instead of going their traditional network route, if they go direct primary care and provide it to all of their employees, no cost to their employees, they'll save on their healthcare spend that year.
Right.
I'm going to say guaranteed, even though I can't guarantee it, but I bet you will. And if anyone listens to this podcast and wants to know more about it, I will happily connect you to the people who can really talk to that. And I think it's super important because, like, if people who own companies or are higher level or know the HR person or whatever, like, we can all do that part to go have the conversations with the right people to say, why don't we look at this? Oh, I heard this thing about direct primary care. I know these like different health plans that exist. And I mean, the numbers are ridiculous. Like, the state of Montana went from like I'm going to get the numbers wrong. Something like a $2 million deficit to like a $12 million surplus just by implementing some simple things for their like government employee health plans. So it's like this secret in healthcare that healthcare is actually affordable. We just aren't paying for healthcare. We're paying for processors and we're paying for lobbies and we're paying for investments and we're paying for all this stuff that has nothing to do with healthcare. So if we can get back to the core of healthcare, and that's why I really like beat the drum of like clinical entrepreneurs too, because if doctors who have been, and nurses and PTs and everybody else who have been repelled by business to the point where they can't even negotiate their own contracts because they like have been like taught that like money is evil, don't talk about it, you just provide patient care. If we can like stop that and turn the tides so that we can really restore the like true like purpose and impact of medical practice from the right business perspectives, I think we can really start to change things and turn the ship, as I say. Yep.
Well, and I like, it's a good way to end it. I like your analogy. I've seen you use it, turning the ship. And I do think you're right. I think clinicians, even if they're not an entrepreneur, them understanding this and then raising their voice is meaningful. It's meaningful. I mean, you're right. That's the best way to serve an age is to betray it. I heard somewhere, and but I'm not so sure it's betraying it. I think it's course correcting it in some way, and that's back to your, turning the ship. So, listen, man, you know how much I enjoy your stuff. If people want to get, follow you, it's obviously Preston Alexander on LinkedIn. I know it's PrestonAlexander.com, I think, right? If they want to learn more, take your course. Anything else? Any other place people want to follow you? I suggest everybody follow you. I just think you're a great read. Just a great read,
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. You can also check out thehealthcarebreakdown.com. It's where the newsletter is hosted. I went ahead and shelled out the cash to have my own URL on Substack. So Preston Alexander on LinkedIn, PrestonAlexander.com, or thehealthcarebreakdown.com. You can find me all those places.
Well, and we'll put those in the show notes too. So I'm looking forward to it. Man, thanks. It's so cool to actually sort of talk to you and look at you. And I don't know what the heck happened with the camera here, but who cares?
It's all good.
Be well, my friend. And we will someday shoot the hooch, or because I will get down to see you. And I really appreciate you jumping on this, and I appreciate it. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Cope. It's great.
All right, cool. You can just stay on here. I'm going to end the recording if I'm doing this right. Okay, so I think what you find about, at least I found in my interview with Preston Alexander, is Preston Alexander makes the complex simple and also puts it under a lens that I don't see most people doing. I just found him so interesting to think about. Insurance is not the most interesting topic, on the planet, but everybody's got it. It affects everyone. And he makes people think about it in a way that is super objective and makes you reconsider a lot of things. At least that's what he did for me, Ryan. I don't know your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of hinted at it in the intro, but like the fact that when he explained the thing of like, hey, here's why they're actually denying your claims. They have your cash, and they want to just stretch that out as much as possible because they want to use your cash to make more cash for themselves, and they don't serve you. What did he? Whoever it was, like they process claims. They don't.
Right. Yeah. Like they process claims. They don't like administer any health care.
Yeah. Right? They're just processing. They're like you're the, it was the payer thing. They're not the payer. They're a processor. You're the payer. You're the payer. You're just letting, like, they're sitting on your cash and you're the payer. So no, I just thought, and again, I'm the way he writes and explains things is very like he almost explains it in like a sentence point, like you said, bullet point thing. It's just very single sentences, which is easy for my tiny brain to understand.
Well, all of our reptilian brains. So hopefully people look at their insurance a little bit differently now, because it affects everything, including the operating room, including your procedure. So, again, because the saying all bleeding stops eventually applies to both surgical patients and healthcare balance sheets. We'll see you next time on Sutures and Cents.